Hello and welcome to In the Classroom, an educational podcast making teaching and learning more transparent. My name is Benjamin Stewart at benjaminlstewart.org. Today I want to talk about a thesis template that I'm sharing with those who are taking thesis seminar. A lot of what I talk about will be, I think, applicable to anyone designing or writing an essay. Some of what we talk about today will be very specific to the course writing or thesis seminar. Thesis seminar is a 16-week course that is being offered in the BA in English language teaching. It's the last semester, so students are asked to complete not only a literature review, but also conduct a study. So collect data, analyze the data, present the results, and include citations and references throughout the paper according to APA, the 7th edition. So I want to talk today about a template that I'm sharing with all students. Actually, I'm asking them to begin with this document, and this, I think, will allow them to create the thesis, but not have to worry so much about the formatting. That is, the styles, the fonts that are being used, the spacing, etc. So there's a page in Notion, which is the platform that we're using to offer this course online, and that is called Sections of a Thesis Manuscript. This is the name of the page where not only the template can be found, which the template is in the form of a Word document that students can download and use, but also a checklist. And I think the checklist will be helpful as they progress throughout the semester. They can check off what they've completed, and they can see at a glance what's left to be completed. But today we're going to talk about the thesis seminar, specifically the first part of the template, which includes the first few opening pages and the literature review. So if it helps, if you're listening to this broadcast and you want to refer to the document, feel free to do so. The first page of the thesis template includes the cover page. Basically, the only thing left to complete for the student is to include their name and all uppercase lettering. The next page is the approval page. Again, nothing to complete there. The third page includes the abstract. So here is where you'll need to include a 250-word paragraph, and basically here you need to summarize the paper. In the abstract, you want to include the purpose and the problem of the study, the participants, the data collection procedures, a very brief description of the results, and final conclusions or implications. The abstract is the only paragraph with no indentation. Just below the abstract, you'll also want to include some keywords. Probably 8 to 10 words is reasonable. And the abstract is going to be on a separate page. Then we'll have the table of contents. Now, I've included in the template a table of contents that was generated automatically by Word. I will create a separate video where I'll show you how to access and use the template if you're not familiar with how to update it, how to create it, if you need to recreate it. But I'll show you that in the form of a video so that you'll be able to see that, as well as all of the formatting that you'll need to consider when completing your thesis paper. But that'll be in a separate video. Then we'll have pages for tables and another page for figures if you have those. Now, as you begin the document in the next page, you want to begin your introduction with a level 1 heading that will include the title of your work. The title of your work should be anywhere from 6 to 12 words. Because it's a level 1 heading, it needs to be centered to the page in bold, main words capitalized, and it needs to be on its own line, on a separate line. Now, for the introduction, all right, you'll want to begin your first paragraph with an introduction paragraph. An introduction should include 3 sections. Begin with a hook. Now, a hook may be a famous quote, it might be an essential question, or an interesting fact or statistic. Include only one of these three options as your hook and try to be brief. If you're using a famous quote, try to keep it to one sentence. An interesting fact or statistic is really the only one of the three options that will require a citation according to APA. So if you're quoting someone, if you're using an interesting fact, then you'll need a citation and then a reference at the end of your document. Now, the trick is to include a good hook that is really representative of the main idea of your introduction, which is usually the main problem of your paper. So those of you who are taking Thesis Seminar, we're going to be very specific in the type of introduction paragraph that we want to create. After our hook, we want to present the context of the problem. All research centers around a specific problem. Otherwise, there's really no real reason to do the study in the first place. So a problem will relate to applied linguistics. It could apply to teaching and or learning. Because we're talking about the literature review, right, you could talk about teaching and or learning, again, applied linguistics, but remember that the actual study needs to focus more on teaching. And we'll talk more about that in the next broadcast, the next episode, where I talk more specifically about the method and the results and discussion. Typically, we recommend that the study itself focus more on teaching, more on pedagogy, but that doesn't mean that you can't also include information about student perspective, what students feel, or collecting any data that the students produce in a typical classroom setting. But again, I'll talk more about that in a follow-up episode to this, where we'll talk more specifically about the aspects of the method in terms of the participants, how to go about creating instruments and collecting data and so on. So after the hook, you want to try to describe in 3 to 5 sentences the context of the problem that make up the bulk of the introduction paragraph by describing what it is, how it came about, why it came about, when it came about, etc. Think of the question words to help prompt you to determine what you should discuss about the problem within this introduction paragraph. It's a good practice to include at least one citation according to APA 7th edition at the time of this recording. Try to include the citation in the context of the problem, so to provide more weight or legitimacy to your position. It's much different if you have at least one quote to back up the problem that you're stating, instead of just simply stating yourself what the problem is. It is important to think about your own experiences as both a teacher and or student in terms of what the problem might be, but always try to find a source to back up the problem that you're developing in this introduction paragraph. Describing the context of the problem with at least one citation is more meaningful than simply writing your own opinion, as I mentioned, which is what you want to do when you write your position, which is what you're doing when you're writing a position with no citation. You're basically just writing your opinion, again, as I mentioned before. The final thing to do once you have completed the context of the problem is to write a one-sentence thesis statement. Now, I'm suggesting a one-sentence thesis statement. There are variations of this, but I think for the purposes of our assignment for this particular thesis, keep it to one sentence. Now, in this one-sentence thesis statement, try to begin with a transition. So remember that you're presenting a problem that should lead in or transition into now your central thesis, the main idea of your entire document. So try to use either sentence connectors, introductory phrases, which are typically prepositional phrases or participial phrases. Subordinating clauses are also a good way to transition when that clause comes at the beginning of the sentence. So again, you're trying to find ways to connect what you just mentioned in the context of the problem and bring that into now your thesis. Think of this introduction paragraph as a problem solution type of paragraph. the problem coming from the context of the problem, those 3 to 5 sentences that you are developing after the hook. The final sentence, the thesis statement, now is going to be your solution. And essentially, the rest of your literature review will set out to expand and unpack what you mentioned more specifically from your thesis statement. All right, so here we have your one-sentence thesis statement should consist of 3 things. It should begin with a topic. It should express a position about that topic. And it should, number 3, provide evidence. So a topic, number 1. Number 2, it should offer a position, which is essentially your opinion about the topic. And number 3, should provide evidence. The evidence usually states 3 reasons or 3 ways that link or connect your position to the topic of your thesis statement. It's common to state 3 reasons, explaining why, or 3 ways, explaining how, and try to choose either reasons or ways, but not both. All right? So try to either think about your entire literature review expressing why something happens primarily, or expressing how. Now, that doesn't mean that within each of the body paragraphs that you can talk about both how and why. But I want you to think about the 3 reasons or the 3 ways that you state in your thesis statement, because later we'll talk about taking those ideas and building a level 2 title or level 2 heading, which will be subtitles that will organize your literature review specifically as it's stated in your thesis statement. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. So again, try to choose one or the other at this point in your thesis statement, either reasons or ways. For a paper of this length, approximately 2,000 to 2,500 words for the literature review, the entire document between 5,000 and 6,000 words. Anywhere from 2 to 4 reasons or 2 to 4 ways is probably your best option. So when you're thinking about developing your thesis statement, try to keep your evidence to 2 to 4 reasons or 2 to 4 ways. You will absolutely need more than one reason or one way, and probably 5 or more than 5 or more are going to be too many, again, for a paper of this length. Remember, the thesis statement answers your indirect question you pose in your problem statement. The problem statement, if you're interested, take a look and do a search for a problem statement, and you'll see an assignment that's related to developing basically the context of the problem. It's always a good idea to think first in terms of the problem before we get into the specifics of a thesis statement. So the assignment for the problem statement is designed to that end. It's designed to really think concretely of an indirect question, a significance that really centers around a particular problem. The context of the problem are the details that support the problem statement. Now, when you're thinking about your topic within the thesis statement, try to use adjectives and a relative clause. This is a good way to expand on the topic in order to try to make your thesis statement more specific, which is hands down the most challenging aspect of producing a sound thesis statement, is narrowing down the topic. Most of our discussions that I have with students are going to relate to making suggestions about how to be more specific. Try to think of the target audience. Try to think of who specifically will benefit, right? Instead of maybe saying learners, we might think of English language learners, or we might even think of English language learners that are adults or who are children. Just depends on the scope. Think of the scope of your study, and think of the literature that you're considering to include in your thesis statement. And this will help you think about how you can narrow it down. But linguistically, we can use relative clauses and adjectives and, of course, prepositional phrases to expand and be more specific in terms of the topic. Think of the topic primarily as the subject of your sentence. The opinion, the position, is going to be the verb phrase or the predicate part of the sentence. The evidence also will be part of the predicate, but that will be more specific, usually with prepositions like by or because. If we're talking about reasons, we can talk about because of these reasons. All right, so in the introductory paragraph, your introductory paragraph with the hook, the context of the problem, and the one-sentence thesis statement should be approximately 250 words and should be stated as a single paragraph. Okay, so this is going to be your introduction paragraph that's going to begin your thesis work just below the title of your paper. Now, once you've completed your introduction paragraph, then you're going to begin your first subheading or your first level 2 heading. Now, in the document, I have already set up the style for level 2 heading. So it's just a matter of going in and modifying the text and putting in a good description that's going to reflect the main idea of this topic. Now, where do these level 2 headings come from? Well, they're going to come directly from the evidence from your thesis statement. Right? So you need to include text that's going to explicitly come from what you list in terms of the reasons or the ways. So remember, we want to think about one or the other. If you have 3 reasons why something happens, then the first reason is going to be stated in as a level 2 heading. It's going to be stated a little bit more specifically than what you probably mentioned in your thesis statement, but it should come directly from that first reason. The second reason will be your second level 2 heading. The third reason will be your third level 2 heading. Now, level 2 heading is going to have, it's going to be in bold. It's going to be on its own line. It's going to be, the main words are going to be capitalized, and that will be the format. That's going to be the format for your level 2 heading. Now, just as the order in which you present your level 2 headings is important, the order in which you present your topic sentences is important as well. Your topic sentence now is going to be the main idea that begins each body paragraph. The reader should be able to read only the topic sentences of each body paragraph to get the gist of your position or argument. Choose relevant organizational patterns that are the most pertinent to your position. For example, you could organize your ideas chronologically or by time. You could organize your ideas by process. You could also organize your ideas spatially or categorically. You could also organize your ideas from the least important to the most important, or vice versa. Now, there are many other ways that you can organize your ideas, but try to choose the pattern or patterns, the combination of patterns that are most specific to your argument, what you're trying to say. The concept of following certain organizational patterns is called coherence. So if your paper is incoherent, then there's usually a problem with organization, the way that your ideas flow from one to another. We want to make sure that we have good organizational structure. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to understand. Forget the grammar, the mechanics of it. Forget if you have a lot of grammatical mistakes, or let's say that your grammar is fine. If your ideas are not organized, then it becomes very difficult to understand. So the idea of coherence relates to all levels of your thesis paper. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you could think of it in phases. The first phase could be the order of evidence stated in the thesis statement. So remember, the evidence that we first mentioned came from the thesis statement. right? So if you're thinking about an example, let's say cell phones. So cell phones in the English language classroom should be used because, and then I could state 3 reasons. Because it allows them to work collaboratively to self-assess, or to peer assess, I should say. Number 2, it could help them be more have access to the teacher. If they have questions, they could use cell phones so that the teacher could be more accessible. That could be a second reason. And maybe a third reason is they could use their phone for accessing their social media to connect with experts outside of the classroom. So those could be 3 reasons. Those 3 reasons could also be the sections, the level 2 headings that you develop. But within each of those sections now, think about the topic sentences that begin each paragraph in the same way. What's going to be the first main idea of the first paragraph? What's going to be the main idea of the second paragraph, and so on. So this is going to be our first phase of coherence, is thinking about simply the order in which you present those 3 reasons or 3 ways as stated in the thesis statement. Now, the second phase is going to be the order in which you present your level 2 headings. All right, now this is very similar to the way that you present your thesis statement, all right, but it really relates to thinking about the phase 3 in terms of the order in which you're going to present your topic sentences. What is going to be the organizational pattern that is going to be best suited to develop those sections or those subsections? Then the final phase will be the order in which you present your sentences within each paragraph. So you're actually going to have evidence sentences, which we'll talk here in a second, that support or align with the topic sentence. So when I'm looking and I'm assessing coherence, I usually start in this order. I start with the thesis statement first and look at the evidence there. Then I look at the headings to see, do the headings correspond and follow the same order as the thesis evidence or the evidence stated in the thesis? Because again, it should follow the same order. And then I look at the topic sentences. Before looking at the individual paragraphs themselves, I just glance at each topic sentence or the first sentence of each body paragraph, and I try to find what is the organizational pattern and structure of ideas that relate to that subsection, that level 2 heading. And then I dive into each paragraph and do the same, looking at evidence sentences that are usually citations and how they're organized, what organizational pattern is being followed in each specific paragraph as it relates to their respective topic sentence. Now, it's important to remember that these organizational patterns that are possible, it's not that you follow one throughout the entire document. No, you're going to probably incorporate many different organizational patterns or a combination of patterns throughout these different phases that I'm talking about. One paragraph might be a process organizational pattern, whereas the next paragraph might be chronological or categorical, right? So it's possible to mix these. It's really dependent on, in the case of a paragraph, the topic sentence. If we're looking at a section, then we're looking at the organizational pattern that is being followed for each of the topic sentences, and so on. So just as your introduction paragraph should follow a specific order, right? The hook, the context, the problem, and then the thesis statement in that order, each body paragraph should also follow a specific order. One way to think of an organization, or one way to think about organizing your body paragraphs, is to use the acronym MEAL in what's called the MEAL plan. The M stands for the main idea of the topic sentence, which usually occurs at the beginning of the body paragraph. The E stands for evidence. Think of details, think statistics, examples, facts, etc., that support the topic sentence. The A stands for analyze or synthesize or compare and contrast, explain, comment. These are all different key words that fall under this idea of analyze. And the analyzed sentences should link or connect the evidence to the topic sentence. It should be very clear what the relationship is between the evidence and the topic sentence. The analyzed sentences are designed for that purpose. Finally, the L stands for linking sentences that connect the main idea of the current body paragraph to the next body paragraph. Or you could also think of the L as being a summarizing sentence. In some cases, it might make more sense to finalize the body paragraph with a summarizing sentence that closes the idea. Another acronym that you might find useful is P, P-E-E. The first letter P stands for position or point. The first E stands for evidence, and the second E stands for explain. So the first sentence of each body paragraph should represent the main idea of the body paragraph, that is, the topic sentence, but can also be thought of as taking a position. Think of each topic sentence as a claim. A claim is where you take a position. A claim is debatable or arguable. For example, cell phones help English language learners collaborate when assessing each other's writing assignments. Notice that this claim could begin a body paragraph if I have evidence that comes from outside sources, like facts, statistics, examples, that support this idea. But a claim always has two sides. Every sound claim must have a sound counter-argument. There should be evidence that supports both the main or initial claim and its counterclaim. Right? So think of a sound initial claim as it's only as good as its counterclaim. A weak counterclaim leads to a weak initial claim. So think about this when you're presenting your ideas and when you're developing your paragraphs, how the counterclaims, not just the initial claims, are going to be interspersed throughout your paragraph. Okay, and we'll talk more about this in class, but it's important to think about what a claim is and where claims are, or how they're going to be positioned throughout your literature review. So the main claim or position of your thesis statement, of your thesis paper, I should say, is your thesis statement. Let me say that again. The main claim or position of your thesis paper is your thesis statement. This is your main claim, right? That's going to apply to your entire document. Your topic sentences are also claims, but they are or should be more specific than your main claim. Again, your main claim being your thesis statement. Your evidence sentences, that is, the details within the body paragraphs, are also claims, but these come from an outside source that are even more specific than the general claims that are your topic sentences. Thus, there are 3 levels of claims, at least, that you should think about when you're drafting your thesis paper. Number 1, thesis statement. That's your main claim. Your thesis statement is going to be your original idea. Number 2, your topic sentences. Again, topic sentences should be your original ideas. Number 3, evidence sentences as details to your body paragraphs. These are ideas now that are going to come from an outside source. These are not original ideas. They should have citations, according to APA, that state who basically are expressing these claims, these ideas. When following the meal plan, only the evidence sentences will typically require citations. All other types of sentences, the main idea, analysis, and linking or summarizing sentences, are usually original ideas, not requiring a citation. Your literature review, made up only of body paragraphs, should mainly consist of original ideas. It's possible to have too many citations in your literature review. Remember, the citations support your original ideas. As a rule, well over half, more than 50% of your literature review should be an original thought. All right, so in the template, all right, we are moving now into the second part, the second heading, and same rules will apply as I mentioned before. Try to take this information into consideration when you're developing each of these subsections. So in developing a level 3 heading now, everything previously stated will also apply when writing your level 3 headings. Whereas level 2 headings are required, level 3 headings are optional. Now, let me give you an example. If you have 3 to 4 level 2 headings, level 3 headings will probably not be necessary. You want to avoid having a heading in your literature review with only one paragraph. That's not enough information usually to justify having a heading. Now, we'll see some examples or some exceptions, I should say, in the method section. But I'm talking now specifically about your literature review. So again, avoid having any type of heading if you only have one paragraph. If you have only 2 level 2 headings, then you probably want to consider a level 3 heading. So let's do a word count. Your literature review should be about 2,500 to 3,000 words in total. 250 words for the introduction and about 250 words for the transition paragraph, which I'll talk about later here in a few minutes. That leaves about 2,000 to 2,500 words left for the body of your literature review. If you only have 2 level 2 headings, that leaves about 1,000 to 1,250 words per section. 1,000 words in one section with no subheadings or level 3 headings is quite a bit. It's a lot of text with no headings. So this is why you probably want to have a level 3 heading if you only have 2 level 2 headings. So when you have 2 level 2 headings, determine the number of level 3 headings to include in both sections, while also avoiding having any level 3 headings with one paragraph. So even if you're using a level 3 heading, don't have so many of those that it produces a 1 paragraph section. Again, we want to try to avoid that. My feeling is probably 2 level 3 headings within a level 2 heading is probably sufficient. If you have 3 level 2 headings, that leaves about 650 words or so in each section, which probably will not require a level 3 heading. It's probably enough. It's probably not having too many words in that section. Again, if you have 3 or 4 level 2 headings. All right, so moving down to the end of the introduction section. So the very last paragraph of your introduction section, of your literature review, I should say, the very last paragraph of your literature review, just before the method section, is going to be what I'm going to refer to as a transition paragraph. It's transitioning from the literature review or what other people say about your topic to now what you have to say as it relates to your own study. This is very important because before the transitional paragraph, there should be no mention of your study. Remember, the literature review is a review of what others have to say. It's getting some literature, a theoretical framework based on what others have said, what others have researched, and you're trying to organize ideas about what others have said. The the transitional paragraph is going to be now your first mention of your own study. So the transitional paragraph, the last paragraph of your literature review, you're going to begin with restating the thesis statement. the thesis statement that you mentioned at the end of your introduction paragraph. You want to restate it and you want to reword it. So don't copy and paste it, reword it, but basically say the same thing. All right, and so after you have restated and reworded your thesis statement in your transition paragraph, then you want to summarize in one sentence, summarize the context of the problem and the purpose. You can also state the purpose of your study. Right? So you want to summarize the context of the problem and state the purpose of your study. After you've done that, you want to transition using sentence connectors, introductory phrases, or maybe a subordinated clause, and mention your study in terms of the research questions. You want to present now your research questions if a qualitative study or a hypothesis if a quantitative study. And then complete the transition paragraph by including a closing statement. This is what I would include in your transition paragraph just before the method section. Transitional paragraph is usually 4 to 5 sentences, and it's the first time you mention your study, as I mentioned before. In other words, avoid mentioning your study at all throughout the entire literature review, except when you mention your research questions and or the purpose. Okay, so you would actually maybe state the purpose first and then your research questions. All right, so remember that your literature review should be written in the third person. And notice that there is no introduction heading that begins your paper. Again, you want to begin with the title of your paper, 6 to 12 words, as a level 1 heading. After your introduction paragraph, the first paragraph of your thesis paper, all subsequent paragraphs are body paragraphs that follow the meal plan until you get to the final transitional paragraph. All right, so I think we'll stop there. It's been a lot of information here. Again, if you're following along, I think it's going to be easier to refer to the notes in the template. All learners should begin with this template. And if you've already developed a literature review from a prior class, then copy and paste into this format, but try not to remove the headings, the level 1 headings, the level 2, and the level 3 headings. Try to just bring in the text as you have it, maybe copy and paste paragraph by paragraph, so not to mess up or remove these styles, these headings. I'm going to, as I mentioned before, I'm going to create a video that shows you how to develop these headings, these styles, the spacing in case something gets messed up. You can go back and change it. But again, the purpose of this template is to try to facilitate formatting your thesis paper, since basically all the spacing, the text, everything is already there. You don't need to change anything as long as you're careful about copying and pasting into this template. If you're creating this from scratch and you're just typing in text, then there's less of a problem or a potential problem messing up the format. But if you do change something inadvertently, we can always bring it back. And again, I think that video that I'll create will help you. It will help those where maybe the formats got messed up a little bit. All right, I think we'll stop there. This has been In the Classroom, an educational podcast making teaching and learning more transparent. Thanks for listening.